Welcome back to another episode of FTK Over the Air, hosted by Exterro. And FTK Over the Air is a twice-a-month podcast, at least for right now. Maybe I think in December, we're going to actually have 3. So there's a bit of a spoiler.
We're going to kick it up a notch in 2023 for sure.
Yeah. So, but as of right now, of the recording of this, we are twice a month, and we talk about general forensic stuff that's going on, workflows. We have people from the forensic community come on and chat with us, and today is no different. But before we introduce our guest, I am Justin Tolman here at Exterro, and I'm joined by Lynne, who is also of Exterro. Lynne, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. This was a really this was a good podcast because if you are a regular subscriber to the FTK Over the Air podcast, this content might seem familiar to you. It's something we've talked about before, and now we get to see the other side of it from a different perspective, which was really fun. But it does involve us being a little self-serving. Sorry, everybody. But we won an award. We never win. It's like, I never win anything. We do win lots of awards, actually. But this was like a really big one, and we're really excited about that. So this person shares in our success in this award that we won. But yeah, we interviewed a fellow from Microsoft. Will you tell us about him, Justin?
Yeah. So David Williams is from Microsoft. He works there as their director of business programs over public safety and justice. So he works with the law enforcement community, the public sector, in that, like, he talks about fire and emergency workers and all sorts of stuff. So they have a lot of different things going. But I think one of the cool things is that Microsoft has actually been in the game of public safety, public services, that sort of thing for a long time.
Correct.
And so it's really cool to be able to work with David. I actually ran into him, met him in person even at the ICAC conference in Seattle on the Microsoft campus, which is a super nice place. I drink a little bit of pop every now and then, soda, depending on where you're from.
Just a little bit of soda just to keep you going, right? A little bit.
But Microsoft had these big fridges full of pop everywhere. It was awesome. But yeah. And so we sit down with David today and we talk about how Microsoft is working to tackle the future of forensics. And the cool thing is Microsoft accepts that, hey, Microsoft is not going to be the one that solves every single problem. And so they're partnering with companies like Exterro to be like, hey, with our powers combined, we can solve a lot of problems. And we talked to him about that. So it's really pretty cool. So.
Right. This is a situation where we sort of look at each other and we're like, do we just become best friends? Yep. Because we are now, able to deliver solutions to, again, this might sound familiar if you're listening to the previous episodes. If not, you should go back and listen to it. We interviewed a fellow named John Price from the West Midlands Police Department in the UK. And they are a huge pioneer of digital policing in the cloud. And so John at West Midlands, again, was told, you won't be able to build this solution. You're trying to use the cloud to upload and store and review and analyze all of your case data and all of your evidence for all your cases. That's crazy. It'll take you 3 years or 4 years to do that. And so he partnered with us, Exterro and FTK, and David at Microsoft Azure. And he was like, I need this new solution. I need to be, the first one to get this thing rolling. I really want to make it work. And so we all jumped in and we figured out how to make it work. And the best part is not like, yay, we built a solution and, best of luck to you, hope it works out for you, John and West Midlands, but it's working great. We've gone over and interviewed some folks over there too, and met some people on his team, and they're tickled over like how great and much more efficient this whole solution can be. And so they've built this solution. It's working. It's really changing the lives of the folks on their police team. And the nice thing is that it's been recognized. And so we won a UK IT industry award for the best security, defense, or law enforcement IT project of the year.
That's a mouthful, but I'll take it.
Yeah. It's amazing. It looks great on a plaque, right? So we won this great award for him being a pioneer in his department and his agency, because the goal was not just like, hey, I want to have a cloud solution, I just want to be the first one. His goal was reducing the processing time of the evidence that they have to review, and just improving their forensic readiness, and being able to like work cases faster, get to justice faster, right? Whether you're convicting someone who's guilty or whether you're releasing somebody who's innocent, like we just need to get there faster, because there's a huge backlog of data. It's not working the way we're doing it now, where we're driving evidence all over the place and everything's physically having to be bagged and tagged, and that whole workflow. So John said, I know we can make this better. I know we can totally revolutionize the way that our forensic investigations are performed, but I'm going to need some help from my best friends, which was Microsoft and us. So David is sort of the brains behind this whole Azure situation, which again, I mean, FTK is a wonderful piece of it, but we do what we do really well. And David, like he said, he does what he does really well. And we're not trying to do what each other does really well. And so we're great at the actual forensic investigation tool. And they are amazing at, I need my data in the cloud, accessible by anybody. I need it super fast. I don't want to pay $3 gazillion in order to do that. Can you make it work? And David said, yeah, let's make it work.
Yeah, totally true. It's going to take partnerships like this to really mitigate the backlog in the case level crisis kind of that's happening. There's more and more cases and not enough people. And so it's going to take software, hardware, cloud companies, on-prem companies, all that sort of thing working together to really give law enforcement, investigators in general, let's be honest, even on the enterprise side, the tools that they need to solve these problems.
Well, it's also going to require a change in thinking. And this is the hardest part, because when you hear the word cloud, I mean, we're a little more used to it these days, but a couple years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, putting things in the cloud was, not safe, super expensive, not secure, easily hackable. And so, we talked to David about those myths. They're absolutely myths. But we have to overcome our old thinking about putting things in the cloud. It's ridiculously secure. And if you think about the cost of having to do that, we have to realize that if you were going to invest the same amount of money because you said, I'm just going to keep everything on premise in my own, digital forensics unit in my own office building, well, guess what? You have to buy a ton of hardware because the size of your data is exponentially growing out of control, right? And so you need physical servers, you need air conditioning because you can't keep it in a hot garage. You need to physically have your building at the exact right temperature. You need a disaster recovery plan because what happens if the power goes out or some sort of disaster happens from Mother Nature? And now your data has to remain completely secure and protected in its little bubble. So the amount of money that you would have to spend in order to really lock down your data and make it as secure as you think that it needs to be in your mind, that costs a lot of money. It's probably in so many instances much more cost effective for you to have a cloud provider like Microsoft Azure, because you can spin things up and down as needed, depending on your cases and what you need to archive and put into like super deep cold storage, or, keep things just a little bit frosty because you're still working on it. Right. It's a mindset that we as a global community have to wrap our mind around this new way of keeping data secure and being able to do everything we want to do as fast as we want to do it so that we can do good for humanity and get criminal cases solved faster. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we jump in with David here, I just have to say we recorded this early in the morning, like early for me, 7 a.m. So remember, I'm former law enforcement when they work all hours, but I was an analyst. All right. So I had an office and I worked not at 7 a.m.
Correct.
So
You burn the midnight oil.
yeah, so the topics are just really cool, and I was into it, but it was also like early in the morning for me, and I sometimes you might think my video freezes up. I don't know why. It was too early. It was too early in the morning. So if you're
See,
watching this on video,
if you're listening to this on audio only, now you're going to totally want to go watch the YouTube version, which we do have available if you'd like to see our faces and, you know, and us in the flesh. But yeah, it was early for you and you had not had your Mountain Dew.
it was. So I sit there.
But don't let that deter you, because again, don't let Justin's face, you know, influence your opinion about this particular topic, because this topic is fascinating. Everything that David is doing in his company, in his division, his career, everything he's seen and done is so amazing. And like, again, we're proud to be best friends with Microsoft, right? We're proud to be their partner, and able to give these kind of solutions to these really big, important customers. And again, there's more on the way. We're working on it. But yeah, Justin, it was a little early for you.
I know, but it's good. And I was actually into the conversation. I was enjoying it, but then I watched it back during editing, and I was just like, oh man, there's a thing. But anyway, let's get over to David, because this is a great episode. We learn a lot about cloud forensics, the forensics industry in general, how Microsoft is solving a lot of problems, and it's really cool. So thanks for tuning in. Let's jump over to David.
Let's get to it.
Okay. All right, and we're back. And we have David Williams with us. David, thanks so much for coming on this morning. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Really nice to be on here with both of you.
For sure. And as we mentioned in the intro, David, you are working with Microsoft, and Microsoft has been putting a lot of effort for a long time into the digital forensics, digital investigations, and, you know, a lot of what we're going to talk about today, what the future is of that. If you could just kind of tell us a little bit about how you got into it, into this world. I know we talked a little bit earlier, and I think you've got an interesting angle, but then also how you got into Microsoft to kind of start.
Yeah, no, happy to, Justin. So I've only been with Microsoft now at, what is this, November? So I've been here just over 2 years. So started in August of 20 during the pandemic, of course, which was interesting. Starting a job and not even meeting anyone that I worked with for, I guess it was almost 18 months before I actually physically met anyone. So that was interesting. But I'm on the worldwide public safety and justice team. It's a team of 4. Led by a gentleman named Kirk Arthur, and Kirk comes from a background in the U.S. Secret Service and worked in several places there, and was a police officer before that, and worked in E-Crimes Task Force on the West Coast and a couple of different places before he left and went to Microsoft. And he has built a team of 4. So we have public safety, we have courts, corrections, what we call coordinated first response. So all the first responder, kind of from the 911 call to the point that it becomes an investigation or some sort of post event. And then I take investigations and analysis, and we call that our industry priority scenarios, but that's the area that I focus on, which is kind of horizontal across, you know, courts needs analytics, corrections needs analytics, certainly investigations, and mostly focus around police, but there's efforts that we do with fire and with emergency services and disaster management organizations and those kinds of orgs as well. And then prior to Microsoft, I was at 3 smaller companies, one for about 7 years. It was defense contracting that kind of split out into being a heavy partner with IBM on their i2 platform, which is a link analysis platform. It's very widely used. It's probably approaching 30 years old at this point. It's been updated several times, but it's almost industry standard on link analysis. So I spent a lot of time there right after I left the military. So I was a soldier for 24 years, retired, went into a company where I was a trainer on intel and intel analysis, although that was not my background in the military, but just spent a lot of times talking about how to take information that was often in spreadsheets and then munge it together, clean it all up, and put it into some sort of system where you could visualize and analyze all that data. And from that, I think I just have a genuine curiosity about, well, how do I get that data? Where does it come from? So I did get trained on, I think it was Encase that I got trained on, and I got trained a little bit on Cellbrite, just their old analog phone extractions. And it wasn't that I was ever really going to do forensics. I wasn't going to go and seize devices and extract them, but it was what were you going to do with that data once you got it out? And so I think and I did open source intelligence, a lot of tools around social media intelligence and other capabilities. So out of all of that, I just kind of built this, I guess, knowledge base through some self-learning and learning from others that are really great in this industry, and landed this opportunity at Microsoft. And my first kind of task out the door was, we want digital forensics. We think that there's a shift to cloud, or potentially a shift to cloud. So go recruit the companies that do this. Like, go have a conversation with them and with customers, and let's see if there's a market opportunity for a platform, a cloud platform with all the power that you get from cloud, to land there. So that's kind of where I started, and just started talking to you guys when it was still Access Data, because you were engaged with our team in the UK, and then several of your competitors as well, right? I mean, OpenText and Magnet and Cellebrite and Nuix and kind of all the big players in this field, just because we think of ourselves as a platform, right? It's all kinds of capabilities that cloud has and all kinds of advantages around these kind of workloads and processes. But that's how I got here, and that's kind of where I started this, what's now a little over a 2-year journey, to see that change and that shift, to see things actually go to cloud in a space that 2 years ago, I'll save it for some point where I could tell the story, but I've literally had people tell me, never going to happen. Nobody's ever going to put this data in cloud. And I'm like, well, then, you may as well get out a chisel and a stone tablet, because you're going to be busy for a long time.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. People do want it, and they are using it, and it's working beautifully. And yeah, I mean, that's why we're excited to partner with you, is that we're finding organizations who are saying, yeah, I know this is strange and foreign and it sounds scary, right? Like, it's my data's in the cloud. This doesn't, I'm law enforcement. This sounds scary. I don't know if that's secure. Again, spoiler alert, it is secure and it's working great. And so we're glad that someone is sort of, the first one to get in the pool. And I think we're going to see a ton of other law enforcement agencies follow suit, because they just want to know that it worked for someone else, and it does. And
yeah, it's an interesting point you make, Lynne, because the thing with law enforcement and generally government in general, the military, the intel space stuff, although they can be very innovative, a lot of times no one wants to be first. It's like, well, I think this parachute will work, but why don't you go out of the airplane first and let's see. And I think now that we've have a few exemplars where people have done this. The UK is a great case study, the West Midlands police opportunity that you guys have put FTK Central in, kind of providing that end-to-end capability all in the cloud. I think as the data starts to come out of there, and maybe some customer stories, and we start to be able to reference it more directly, it will be the thing that has people take a look and say, okay, well, it's a different country, so let me look into it, make sure it fits with my laws and my policies, and we'll start to shift that way. But absolutely, yeah, it's as you say, spoiler alert, people are doing it, and they're doing it all over the world.
Well, and also, secondary spoiler alert, like, they are looking at it in the United States, and Justin's working with some organizations on that. And yeah, they've said, well, who else is doing it? Oh, we've got this whole West Midlands police scenario. And that was a major relief for them to know that they weren't first, right? And they are, and again, they're figuring, their organization is set up differently, so they're trying to figure out how to adapt that model. But yeah, like, I think we're going to have more and more of these conversations. And like we talked about before, I don't know, it's sort of, it's the heartwarming part for me. It's the greater good. It's, yeah, like, let's get everybody up in new technology so they can work cases faster, so we can get to resolutions faster and get to convictions faster, or exonerate people faster. Families get closure faster. Like, the technology is wonderful, but yeah, the human part of it is what I think that's what keeps us coming to work every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of time talking to folks around the child sexual abuse material, and I listen to way more podcasts and live and true crime stuff than's probably healthy for any individual. But it's shocking, to somebody from the outside looking into a world that I really didn't have any real knowledge of until I started digging into it. Just the size and scope of that problem. And much of what it is people need to talk about it so that it's not, it's not the thing that no one talks about. Because if you don't talk about it, people don't realize what the problem is. And then the volume of information that someone has to go through, and they have to go through it the right way. It's got to, have chain of custody. It's got to follow good process and procedure so that it can stand up in court to get some of the most heinous criminals, from my perspective, off the streets and protect kids. So I'm with you. It's the greater good. Sure, it drives revenue, and you guys sell software and we sell cloud services. But from my perspective and my team's remit, that's all secondary. Like, we're not, I'm not out front knocking on a door saying, "Would you like to buy Windows or PowerPoint?" That's not my job. It's more to go and talk to customers about why cloud, why it matters, how it can help you achieve your mission objectives, like time to evidence, get people off the streets faster, close out criminal cases quicker. Because let's face it, police are undermanned, under-resourced, overtasked, and they have more data than they can possibly deal with without using some sort of technology.
I just gave a presentation, but as part of that presentation, I did research on that very thing, and what it's looking like, at least in the United States, is departments are down 15 to 20% after COVID due to retirements and other, things going on. And so, yeah, you mentioned earlier, what do we do with the data once we've got it? Well, you've got to look through it, but we're down 15 to 20%. Caseloads are actually going up. Even if we just look at, you mentioned CSAM, child sexual abuse material, those cases have skyrocketed across COVID. So we're getting less people, more cases. And so, I like what you said about Microsoft, at least your team being like, listen, the way that we talk about it here at Exterro within the forensic team is we're kind of the nerds that just have the passion for forensics, for solving problems. We just want to go hang out with those doing the work. And yeah, there's a product that has to be moved, but I think that passion translates into solving those problems. If you don't have that passion, you're not going to build the right thing, I think. And that's where I think Microsoft has really shown recently, but also over the last, again, we were talking before we started recording, Microsoft has been in this game for a long time in various different things. And you can tell that Microsoft has had people with that passion inside for a long time. And that's been cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big part of our culture at Microsoft is a little bit of, yes, we do things. We're a business, and businesses, ultimately have to have revenue to run. But that's not what gets us out of bed in the morning. It's not only the use of technology to solve crimes and work on sustainability issues and water issues and how do we get clean energy. I mean, there's so many things that are wrapped around this kind of being socially responsible and doing good for the planet and for our customers. And in the public safety and justice space, it's that ethical use of artificial intelligence and the responsible use of technology, because the reality is that technology can do a lot of things, right? You could program it to do just about anything that you could think of, but that doesn't mean it should be used that way, right? It really shouldn't. And I read our president Brad Smith wrote a book, Weapons and Tools, or Tools and Weapons. I'm probably getting it backwards. I don't see it on my shelf right now, but anyway, it's all about that, right? It's about how you use AI ethically and why you use it a certain way. And where we kind of draw that line. And it's not, I've come around to understand from my perspective, it's not a lack of will to support law enforcement, the military, or any other customer that way. It's about supporting them in a way that we all can look at ourselves in the mirror every morning and be happy with what we did and proud of what we did. So you think about like mass surveillance. You would never want to have your technology be responsible for somebody getting picked up for a crime and put in jail for some period of time while they're waiting to get bailed out, or whatever that judicial process is, and they end up, their lives are devastated, and it wasn't them, right? It was a mistake of the algorithm or a mistake of the application of technology. So I think a little bit of it like the what are the Hippocratic oaths for the doctors, right? Do no harm. So it's a little bit that approach, which is it's been really an interesting journey for me, because coming from the military, I was like, just give me the best tools to go do my job. I gotta, I have to do this thing. But I've taken a very different perspective to it, and I think it's super applicable in this space as we talk to people that have two primary concerns. One, whatever we do will hold up in court, right? Because it has to, it has to withstand that kind of judicial rigor and review, and make sure that it'll hold up. And then two, security concerns, like what's the security of cloud? Because as Lynne was saying, I'm concerned about that. What's this cloud thing? Where is it? I can't touch it, see it, smell it. I can't open a door and see my data. So yeah, it's really been an interesting journey so far.
I think of it like, have you seen the Discovery Channel stuff where all the penguins get on the edge and they sit there and jostle, and then finally one falls off and like, he's fine, and then they all go in. And I think that's the forensic industry to a point. They see cloud, they see the benefits, and they all sit there and jostle on the end until one of them makes that dive.
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned earlier, you work with many partners, Exterro being one, to solve these problems. So you're a layer back from that. So what's Microsoft doing there? And how did you guys approach this problem to, what do we do with the data? And then Microsoft said, okay, here's what we're doing.
Yeah, so it's a great question, because we don't, I don't show up to a customer and they say, hey, talk to me about cloud and digital evidence or digital forensics and investigations. And I do that and they say, great, I want to buy one of those Microsoft investigative cloud things, because we don't sell that product, right? It doesn't exist. We have all those components and layers that do things like automate processes and do translation and do transcription and optical character recognition out of images, classifiers and algorithms that just help people get through data quicker and more accurately and focus on the things that matter to them in their investigation. So the approach has really been, we're a layer, a platform that supports these efforts. And here's all the kind of component capabilities and services that specifically get at your problem. And one of the things that we've done a lot recently is these industry accelerators. I know I've spoken to you about them, Justin. I've shown the folks at Exterro in the past some of those industry accelerators, but they're just what it sounds like. They're a grouping together of capabilities that we've put together around specific problems. One of them is called digital evidence triage. Just what it sounds like, right? It's how do I get evidence that I've seized through, a warrant or off of devices, digitize it. If it happened to be paper, you could scan it in and run it through the same process, but digitize it and then put it through a process that helps me to say, okay, I've got, 2 terabytes of data. That's a lot of data, right? Especially if it's text, videos, images, it's a lot. So how do I run it through a system that can help parse it and categorize it so that I can go, okay, well, this is the nugget. This is the 10% or the 2% that matter to my investigation. So don't make me go through and categorize and tag everything else. Let me just get to the nugget. And then once I have, what I need, if I need to get additional information, I can start working concentrically out into the data that seems to be less relevant. So that's really been the approach for us, is we have platform capabilities that only exist at scale inside of a cloud environment. So that's the one big thing that's really for the frontline person, the investigator, the people that really are messing with the data and have to get through it. Then the step back from that, the second piece is that I've really been kind of driving this point home as I've learned myself is the security issue. When people say, I don't think cloud's secure. I'll tell you that if your organization doesn't have the capabilities to keep a nation state from attacking your infrastructure, then you're not secure and you need to be in cloud. Like literally, we put $1 billion a year into security. We have 8,500 security professionals that are looking across trillions of signals across the entire ecosystem of Microsoft endpoints and platforms and all of our customers. And nobody has a bigger need or motivation to secure that than we do. Because if we can't secure it and you don't trust us, we don't have a business. Right? So we put those kind of efforts in. If you have 2 servers in a closet and you got some great IT professionals, but they're not, it's not 24/7, 365. I mean, there's all kinds of horror stories about ransomware and data breaches and data losses, and then you can't even recover it and you lose critical evidence, gone forever because you couldn't recover it. So that's kind of the 2 pieces is here's the capabilities we can do around scale and what we call cognitive services, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning processes, storage and security. And the storage piece really is, I've talked to so many people that say, yep, so we get a big case and we go down, we go, we don't have any more space. We need to go buy a new rack. We need to go buy a new server. We need to put new hard drives in. In cloud, it's elastic, right? It just expands and expands and expands. And we can control through orchestration and your own policies and give you the controls to be able to change the level of storage you put it in. So if you need to keep all the data, but you only need 10% of it to be readily available, you can archive that data in deep storage where it's literally pennies to store it. But you don't have to worry about that device being accessible. You don't have to worry about rain wiping it out. I've been in a couple of DFUs where they had multiple cases sitting around on hard drives. And the guy's like, my worst fear is I lose one of those drives or I plug it in and it's just dead. It won't work. And all that case data is gone because we put it in the cloud, and it's not just in the cloud one place. It's replicated multiple places because it provides all that resiliency.
Well, that was one thing that John Price said from the West Midlands. He said, our process or our workflow is I seize data from a crime scene, I put it in a car, and I drive it, I don't know, might even be a couple hundred miles into a digital forensics unit, a DFU. And then to your point, like, all right, it sits in a pile, it sits in a box. And so people who sort of express concern over the security part of it, it's like, okay, but the way that you manage the data now, it's driving in a random car across your country and then sitting in a box. There's no way you could, you could get worse than that, but but the better solution is, to be able to upload the data literally as soon as you've physically collected it from somewhere, a premises, a person, wherever you've gotten the device from, and immediately a frontline officer can upload it, and you don't even have to wait however long it takes that person to drive across town or across the country to offload it to someone who's a forensic analyst. Like, already you've saved time and it's infinitely more secure. I think the reservations on the security issue, I think those are just going to evaporate, because when you do point out to people, well, what are you doing to keep your data secure now? It's really frightening.
Yeah, I've been in those. I've been in rooms where I'm providing some thought leadership or talking about these issues, and pop up a slide that says, "Hey, here's your current process: collect evidence, put it into this SAN or NAS in a local place. This is all right to the DFU. Not to mention all the things you just said, where it's got to be seized and driven in or flown on an airplane or wherever to get that data there. But then you put it in this process, and when you get ready to distribute it, you're either creating a report and you're sending it via email or OneDrive, or you're dropping it out somewhere, but it's just a report, or you're putting it on a thumb drive and then you're distributing it. People say, well, the only one that really matters about being super secure is the original, because we don't want to ever lose that and compromise the investigation. But that's crazy that you're just distributing things when we have this thing called cloud, called the internet, where people can come to something that looks a lot like a web page and they can just come to the data. You don't have to drive. You don't have to go sit next to the guy in the, the examiner and say, yeah, show me the data. Let's see what it is. My hypothesis on this crime. Let's see if we got the right information. Instead, you can just put it up in some sort of an interface where a review can take place, and everybody has one version of the truth, all have the same tools, and multiple people can access it simultaneously.
That's going to be the new name of our podcast, Justin. One version of the truth. Love
it. I do think that we have to be honest with ourselves a little bit, because I get these questions like, okay, well, my bandwidth is X. Like, I have a network that has this bandwidth, and just do the math. I've got 5 terabytes of seized data, and I'm going to put it over this pipe, and it's going to take 16 hours to upload. I could drive it over there faster. Like, okay, I mean, but nobody's arguing with that, right? We're not saying that it's a perfect fit end to end for everybody and everything. If you can drive across town and hand it to somebody, they can start processing it, and they have better bandwidth, a dedicated pipe or something to upload it, then do that. No one's saying that you have to follow the entire process. You have to work within the parameters of what you have available, what your budget allows, what your IT infrastructure is. But getting it into the cloud through whatever point that you have, once it's there, then you can do so much more with it in terms of people coming to the data, regardless of what you saved on the front end with driving time and fuel, and as you said, the very narrow entry points with some dedicated machine that's authorized to upload data.
I talked to I can't say who, but we're talking to a large law enforcement agency, and they were talking about their server setup and what they had for processing. It was all on-prem, this sort of thing. And we're like, okay, this is cool, whatever, And he's like, yeah, it's cool. And so then we're like, well, what do you really think about it? He's like, I hate it. I hate everything about it. And it was because of what you talked about. So he's like, we buy a petabyte of data, then we fill that petabyte of data, and now I got to go buy more. And he's like, his role has transitioned out of investigations, out of digital forensics. He's now an IT guy, a server admin or whatever. And and they have other people, of course, to support him but it comes back to your point where we have a group of people that want to be doing investigations. They want to be solving crime. They want to be reviewing data. And what originally sounded like a good idea of like, hey, instead of hard drives sitting around in a closet, let's upgrade to a server. Well, now they're constantly managing that, and it's become a drain on their budget. It's become a drain on their manpower. And then it's one of those cost sunk fallacies that starts to happen. Yeah. Well, we've spent all this money on this server. David Williams says there's this cloud, but we got all this money in this server, and it's so you feel trapped, and it's an easy trap, I think, to get into. I just gave a presentation on the differences between forensic exam and forensic review, but you mentioned how Microsoft is taking large amounts of data, making it into the small nugget for review. What's some of the feedback that you guys are seeing? How are you angling yourselves to really support forensic review, going forward?
So to support forensic review, and this is where I think the power of cloud comes in. So let's just take for instance, I seize a phone as part of an investigation. I think the latest iPhone and stuff will hold almost a terabyte of data. That's a lot of video. It's a lot of audio. Not to mention all the apps that can take you out to places, social media, Google, all of these capabilities. You pull all that data in. Now what do you do with it? So you got to start categorizing it. Like, what is it? And what points in time is it relevant? How do I see all of these things? So think about text messages, phone calls, your track history from Google, if your geolocation's turned on, or even if it's just pulling off of Wi-Fi and LTE or whatever. You want to be able to lay all those out across time and start seeing where they match, right? Like, where was the person when they sent the text or they made this phone call? Can we then look at video that we've gotten from somewhere and start matching all that data up? And it sounds like a relatively straightforward process. Like, investigators know that these are the things I need to do. I've got to bring together the data. I've got to narrow it down. I've got to put it on the timeline. I need to figure out where, why, and start lining all those pieces up. But you got to go through the bucket of data, right? Here's your sand. Now sort through it and find the bits of sand that matter. And that's really where we're going, is the ability to do things like extract text from images. So guy's taking a picture of himself with his crew, a couple of gang guys or something. They're taking a picture, and in the background is the side of a building and a street sign. Well, we can extract all that data. Now we know where it's at, right? We know the location. And that becomes searchable. We can automate the tagging process of all that data. So instead of a JPEG that may have some EXIF data on the back of it, in metadata that tells you kind of when and where because the GPS was turned on, we're able to extract all that out, auto tag it. So now when you're conducting searches, all that data becomes searchable. All the tags become searchable, and you can start to connect the dots. Now, we're not giving you the I2 solution or the Exterro solution that actually does the graph. But what we're doing is taking all the data and putting it into a format like JSON. We're enriching the entire process so that you get a better graph quicker. So instead of having to build a picture of the text message, build the picture of what the images are, get the pictures of the social media, look at the Google tracks data from the GPS locations, and then start trying to put it all together in a single picture, we can automate a whole bunch of the enrichment of that process, put it in a structured format so that, one, you can search it with any kind of search tool that can manage through a JSON looking for keywords and elements. And we can use natural language processing so you can ask a question rather than write a Boolean query or a SQL statement that most people, one, don't know how to do or don't know how to do well or don't want to do. And then put all that data together so that it gives you that rich visualization, which gets you there quicker, right? I think that was the point that Lynne made right from the beginning. If you want to do good, doing it faster is important, because otherwise people are out on the streets. They're continuing to do harm. I don't remember the stats, would have to look it up, but Atlanta, and there was another big city in the US, did a study on the number of people and the percentage of crime that's associated with them. It's usually a small group of people that are creating a lot of havoc. So being able to get to evidence faster and get that person off the street, it's not like you just solved one thing. You may have stopped a whole bunch of future processes and be able to solve things that you hadn't solved before because they're all tied back to the same person or the same organization the person's a part of. So that's a big part of what we're doing.
Watching.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just remind me, I was watching a show years ago. I couldn't even tell you what it was, but it might have been Minneapolis, Indianapolis. I don't know, something that sounded like a long word. But they had analyzed geographically where the crime is committed. And they were like, it's a 2-block radius. So all we have to do is put patrol cars in this all the crime happens right here. Right. It doesn't spread out. And so, yeah, like if you can get things done more quickly, like you're not having to scour the entire state, to find these people. It's like they're probably in the 2-block radius where all the other criminals are. And then, we're just like shooting fish in a barrel. Sorry, that's probably a bad analogy, but
no, but it gets the point across, right?
Yeah. Like we're not trying to, we usually know where things are happening. It's just that we are constrained by our own technology and that we just can't get to things fast enough, and it stacks up and stacks up and stacks up. And, there's evidence boxes and rape kits and, we just can't get to it fast enough. Between cloud and automation, like you talked about, like automatically identifying things and being able to provide that intel to whoever's doing the forensic review, a human being doesn't have to sit and do and compile all of that information by hand, which, we talked about that on our podcast with an image categorization company called Semantics 21 in the UK. It's like, they were like, there's got to be a better way for people to categorize images than having to, one, physically look at them and they're disturbing, but we should be able to use artificial intelligence so that we can do it faster and less emotionally draining on the people having to do the work. So yeah, like that in itself, just that one little tool has, been able to totally change the landscape of CSAM review. So we're on the right track.
One of our recent accelerators, we put a bunch of data in it, right, so that we can do demonstrations, and it's text, it's images, and it's video with audio embedded in it, so that you kind of get that full experience about what cloud has to offer. And the text data set is little over 4.5 million words. So if you read 250 words a minute, 8 hours a day, it takes you 37 days just to read that data. Now, if it's in a foreign language, that's a whole nother problem. And then how do you recall, like, Justin Tolman, that sounds familiar. I think that was back on page 497, right? And how do you connect those dots? So if you can pull all that out and just make it searchable and say, just return me everything that talks about Justin Tolman. Oh, wow, this guy he shows up in 10 different places. Well, maybe we ought to go talk to that guy. It's just, as I tell people all the time, this isn't about something like, oh, well, how's that stand up in court? I said, this isn't the evidence. The evidence is already what you have, right? That you've hashed and you're going to maintain and you're going to prove that it isn't tainted. Nobody's messed with it at all. This is a lead generation system to augment the human capacity to be able to go through all these volumes and find the bits of data and connect the dots across things that are almost impossible. I mean, unless you have an eidetic memory, you're not figuring that out, and you're still going to have to go through it, right? It's crazy.
And here we thought Justin was just a nice podcast host, but really,
he's a great podcast host.
I'm in all the documents, all the 400 million word documents. When you talk about that in the back end, thinking back to an earlier comment, so you mentioned in the military you did things one way, and then you come out and you look at it a totally different way. And when we oversimplify forensics, like when I first got in there, like there's like these branches of forensics. You got law enforcement, you got military, you got private, and then like academics fits in there as well. Mm-hmm. And each one has like, they're related, but they have different objectives. And we're told military, I just need actionable intel. Where do I drop the bomb, or where do I go strike next, or what do I need to harden? But I feel like what we're doing now is we're taking defensibility and courtroom level standards and stuff. But then we looked over at the military side and was like, wait, actionable intel, fast. For the most part, I need to know exactly what you said. Where did Justin appear? How did he appear? And should I go talk to him? And solutions and hybrid solutions like between Microsoft Azure and FTK Central is what is review, that actionable intel. That's what I need. And that combination is really what's taking forensics, I think, to the next generation is, you're still going to need like the guys that can hex dive and rebuild databases and really do your forensics. You will always need those people, and they're always going to be in hot demand. But people like me or whatever take forever to train up. We're high maintenance because we need nice freaking computers and comfy chairs and stuff, and a steady supply of Mountain Dew. But a reviewer, Azure's taken the power. Azure has the brains and the cycles to chug this heavy data, so I can get on my paperweight of a managed machine. And as long as I have a browser, now I can start working through this evidence quickly. And I think for things like, especially like cold cases, you mentioned that. Yeah. When do we have the time for that? You know? And so,
it's super interesting, Justin, because, you think of, a lot of times I think of cold cases as, something from 50 years ago. There was no digital forensics, right? There wasn't, any digital evidence involved in a crime was minuscule, and probably nobody actually knew how to do anything with it. But truly, those processes, if you can digitize the old paper, the audio files from interrogations, witness statements, at the point that you've done that, there's very little difference between that and the information taken through a digital forensics process, right? Now you have evidence and you need to review and get through all of it. And cold cases were really interesting. So we were just at the International Association of Chiefs of Police in Dallas here last month, and we invited a gentleman named Vince Pancoke to be a guest speaker with us. We had about a 1-hour session, and Vince was the lead investigator on the latest investigation into the betrayal of the Anne Frank case in World War II, right in the Netherlands, right at the end of the war. And he assembled this group of researchers and analysts and all kinds of people and started digging through literally the coldest of cold cases, right, 70 years old, and trying to narrow it down to what happened. And Microsoft got involved at some point with them and provided them some resources, and they brought in a partner from Spain that provided some tooling and some tuning of the system. And when I spoke to Vince, and it's a great presentation, the book is amazing, just super interesting story. But he said, this has been 5 years, I think, since it was kind of all wrapped up. It's on, there's a 60 Minutes episode and others. He said, we'd still be investigating. We'd still be looking through the data if we hadn't had technology to help us do things like revisualize what the location looked like and the name of the streets were in 1944 versus what they are in 2015. Right? Because the street names have changed and some buildings have changed and who lives there. So you think about being able to digitize and re-envision a neighborhood over time. So think about cold cases. What did it look like then? Who was there? Was there a business there, or was it a vacant lot? Who lived in that house? Being able to pull all that data together and cross correlate it so that you can really start to dig into the data. And I would go back to your comment about the military and that targeting process. And this is my opinion, right? When I started getting involved with policing and police organizations, I quickly realized that they have to have a probable cause, right? Got to have a warrant. There's processes that have to be followed. The military follows some pretty rigorous processes too, because it's bad news to do something. You don't want to drop a bomb in the place that a bomb shouldn't have been dropped, right? It's bad information operations. It can create more enemies. I mean, it can really destroy the will of the population to support you. I mean, there's lots of damage from hitting the wrong targets, right? Certainly, it's a rapid targeting cycle. We're trying to get ahead of people that aren't following rules. They're not just committing crimes in small areas, but truly, targeting, in my view, is targeting. Doesn't matter. Data, intel, investigation, it's all the same. There may be different rules you have to follow about how you're able to get that data and what you're able to do with it, and who can do what, when, where, and why kind of processes. But the data's all got to be munged together the same way. It's just some of it's really a matter of time. If somebody's committed a murder, the person's dead, you start the investigation. You want to get that done as quickly as possible, but there's a little more time, right? The crime's happened, it's post-event, you're trying to do something. Where the military, if there's an attack and you grab data through sensitive site exploitation, you're trying to follow that target to the next one to get ahead of them. You may need information faster, and you may be willing to take a little more risk and get a little less clarity on the data, as you say, actionable versus prosecutable. But it's really the same process. And the tooling, man, I mean, the military uses a lot of the same tooling that police agencies use and that big corporations use to look at the internal data and internal threats, if you will. So I don't think it's that different. It's just a matter of what's the mechanism of engagement. Are you sending a platoon to attack something because you got actionable information, or are you sending a SWAT team, to secure the area and grab this person so that you can put them in through the judicial system?
Yeah, they're all at the same conferences.
Absolutely, right? They are.
They're all rubbing shoulders, all trying to figure out what's the best way to get the data and parse it out. I saw that 60 Minutes on the Anne Frank case, and yeah, the interesting thing though, you mentioned when you think of cold cases, you think 50 years ago. In digital, almost like the real life 50 years, it's kind of like dog years or something. In digital, 50 years ago is like 10 years ago. Yeah. Like, oh man, you were using, and how often does that happen where a case is reopened? To your point, it could only be 10 years ago. And it was like, oh, well, we didn't have the ability to open up this encryption on an iPhone or at the time, or we didn't have the ability to decrypt this level of BitLocker at the time, Yep. And we had, when I was doing investigations, we would take in a phone, and it was an iPhone or something at the time, and it'd be locked, and they'd be like, can you break it? And nope. Well, what do we do with it? Well, we can hold it in evidence on the chance that, something comes along that will break it.
Right.
And, fast forward, now it's like 8 years, Grayshift, with their Gray Keys solution comes along. And now, and then, oh, hey, we've got how many iPhones sitting back there, and okay, well, we've got 20 iPhones and 5 of them are homicides. Well, let's bust those 5 phones out that are homicides, run them through the Grayshift. But where are we going to get the manpower for that? Well, true, but let's call up David Williams and get it into Azure, and they will do the heavy lifting and let us know when, that sort of thing is where we can really look back not even too long ago and start to solve problems without, and see the real thing of this, because who was I talking to? I think Dan Sumter or something here in the company, and he's like, man, how do we phrase this so it doesn't sound like we're just giving them a ton more work? and that's the one thing that I always talk about is, hey, we're doing more without dumping more onto your plate. And I think coming back to review, it's not just, Lynne uploads data, Lynne reviews data. It could be Lynne uploads data, Lynne, Justin, and David all review data. And so what you're doing is you're distributing that out, which is another benefit of cloud. Yeah. If I have look back at the start of FTK, one box, one user, air gapped.
Right.
Okay. That's good for its application. But if all of a sudden I've got a case with 20,000 devices and, whatever amounts of data, I need to spread that out. And you're not doing that on one box, one user. You need a collaborative, typically cloud environment.
Yeah, you were talking about the air gapped one specific device with a highly trained person that's gone through years of credentialing and continues to go back over and over and over again. That person, you need them doing the hard things in the digital world, right? So proving that Lynne was the person behind the keyboard, right? Looking into all of that user details and login information to say, well, more likely than not that it was her because she checked her bank account 2 seconds before that, and then she was on her Facebook account that she had to log into. So the thing that happened in the middle was probably her. She probably didn't stand up and someone else sat down and used the computer for those 8 seconds or whatever it was. So you need them doing those hard things, or, and I'll get this all wrong, right? But going through deleted files, things that people think are deleted that are still there, on the drive that can be pulled out. Like an investigator is not going to do that. Detective has no idea how to do that. It may not even understand that there's stuff like that exists. But if you can take all the, what I call like the surface files, right? The text files, the images, the videos, and you can put them up somewhere, they can start looking at that. Because I don't know the statistics, but I would venture to say that most cases, it's that surface level data that helps to really get the investigation going. And make that you need to go back somewhere where there might be video and get it before it's overwritten. And then by the time it's ready to go to court, if you need to be able to prove that that person was the one behind the keyboard when that occurred, you can have the expert working on that. So the expert investigator can work with the data that they can work with. And it's interesting, Justin, just to transition a little off of that, your comment about, well, we had all these iPhones and we couldn't break into them back then. We didn't have the technology, so we save them. I was just watching a 2020, I think, last night, and they were talking about this DNA, right? So it's digital is now like the old DNA. They would collect some evidence. DNA didn't exist 70s, early 80s. They didn't know what to do with it. And then even if as it evolved into the 80s, it literally, I think the guy on this show last night said, I needed a pool of blood to get a DNA profile. Now I learned a new term, picograms, which is like 1,000th of a nanogram, right? It's some infinitesimal amount of DNA that now they can test. So all the digital capabilities that are evolving are much aligned to that, right? And I think people, juries and judges all expect you to have digital evidence as well. I think they're expecting that. Like, well, did they have a cell phone? Well, they had a cell phone. Well, you didn't tell me that you know for a fact that they were there with their cell phone. You haven't analyzed that data, so I don't believe they were there. I think it's just like DNA as it evolved. People expect that to be a part of the evidence. They watch a lot of CSI. We're getting to the point now on digital the same way. One, hold on to it, to your point, because technology evolves, and certainly cloud can help you get through it rather than thinking of it as, oh, now I got to go back and add a whole bunch more to my already overfull plate. And the technology will evolve so that you can start to get at things that, maybe a year ago you couldn't. And cold cases happen quick, right? They get passed. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The heyday of serial killers is over, guys. Like the BTK Strangler and the Hillside Strangler. Like, man, those guys back in the day had it made, right? Because we couldn't catch up to them fast enough, and we didn't have the ability to analyze the evidence. And so, yeah, it's like, man, I sure hate to be a serial killer today, because you're not gonna. I don't even know that you can become a serial killer. You might get one. But I don't know that you'll be able to get your multiple murders in, because we're gonna.
Is that the only thing holding you back, Lynne? Is the advancement of technology?
I feel bad for those guys. It's a terrible generation for serial killers right now.
Yeah,
it's a hard life.
You said something too, David, that we say all the time here is let your professionals be professionals.
That's right.
Stop. Now, Justin will argue with me, because, we will say, stop making your professionals sit and push the button and wait for data to be processed. And like, why are you making them do menial tasks? They are highly trained and educated. But Justin will argue that time spent waiting for something to process is very productive.
Hey, now.
It's the secret. Like, don't take away my processing time. That's the time I get to, do all things I want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, we say that all the time. Like, you do not have enough trained, skilled, experienced forensic professionals. We talk about this all the time as well. Like, the number is over 800,000 open cybersecurity jobs in the US alone. And we don't have enough people to fill that. We already have almost 1 million jobs open that we cannot fill. So like, why are you going to take the people that you do have that are highly trained and do have the experience and say, like, you're just going to have to sit here and wait to press the button, geez, sorry. We can't do that anymore. We have to evolve. And so, yeah, thank goodness, in the case of West Midlands, it's like, you've changed their life. You've changed all those people's lives in that police force. Their day-to-day life is dramatically different. And we've gone over there and we've met with them and talked to them. And, some of the frontline officers are like downright giddy talking about their new solution. They're like, oh, I love our new solution. I get to do this, and this is so fast, and I just upload it. And I don't have to check out the laptop, and no one's mad at me because I've hoarded it. Like, they just have a whole different life. Everything's just different for them, even in their job. So some of them might be mad about it, but
I was at a North Carolina police agency here, probably, I guess it's been almost 3 months ago now, and sitting there with their forensic unit, I did talk to the DFU, which, oh, by the way, was one person. So he was literally having to take all of his stuff to another agency to verify and validate his findings. And if he could have put that in cloud, they probably could have done that without trekking back and forth with the data, trying to do that. But just their forensic process, right? Just gathering physical evidence. The process, one document, literally, to get out the pen, get out the clipboard, fill out this information, case number X piece, just the header information was approximately 4 minutes per piece of evidence. Some crimes have hundreds of pieces of evidence, right? If there's 10, that's 40 minutes. Right? It's crazy. So we've been working with them to automate, not just digitize, but automate that process. So now you can just pull it up on, a tablet and drop downs. Maybe you got to add a couple things case file, but you're logged in, so it knows who you are. You don't have to write your name on every piece of evidence. It knows who you are, and it's all auditable. So you can prove, what they did. Not only that, but then you can go back and search against all that data because it's digital. It's not sitting in a file folder somewhere. And all those processes, automating things, automating clicks. Why do you have to sit there and watch something and wait for it to pop up and say, okay, I'm done Please push the button for me to continue my job. You can automate those processes. Many products are already automating that in the forensic space, as well as using just what do they call robotics process automation. I mean, literally, you can do screen recordings that say, when this happens, click here, and save the recording, and it does it automatically. So yeah,
Yep, we have an automation tool as well for FTK that people are starting to adopt, and they're saying, "Oh my gosh, I used to." John Price, again with the quote, John Price literally said, the 16 hours of wasted time between when an investigator leaves at the end of the day to go home and then they come back the next morning, nothing would happen. Right. I mean, maybe you could leave something to be, maybe you leave processing running so it would run overnight. But then once it stopped processing and it was completed, well, then it would just sit there. Where now we can automate it to start doing keyword searching and labeling and tagging and organizing and filtering for you automatically, so that when you do come back, 16 hours, after your shift is over, like now you have something to review and you don't have to push the button to just start the keyword searching. He's like, we've saved so much time just running things overnight that was previously completely wasted time.
Yep, and that time equals bad people off the streets, less crime, money saved. I mean, just the fuel alone, I can't remember what the ridiculous number was we got out of the UK team, that there was going to be, I think it was a 35% increase in fuel costs alone just for patrolling. So if you can do things like just don't go to the office, like pull up Teams and have your morning parade meeting that says, here's what we're going to do for the day. Here's what happened last night. I just saved, I guess over there it'd be liters, right? I just saved 20 liters of petrol driving in and out, not to mention the hour plus time that goes to the quality of life on somebody who's already overworked, understaffed, under-resourced. So I think this is a wide open market. It's a place that is definitely shifting to cloud. As I was telling you guys before we started recording, I spoke to a CEO of an organization that is very much in this space. And their business was really built around hardware and racks of servers and kind of making that available for people. So think of it as a little bit like cloud, but more it's like I have a very secure enclave kind of server capability. And when I spoke to him and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is where it's headed, he literally said, I think you're 5 years ahead of where this is going to be. Like 5 years from now, maybe we'll be moving off of air-gapped and on-prem systems. And I thought, you've been in this space longer than I have, but I think you're wrong. I think technology is moving faster than that. And I said a year ago, I think we'll be doing all of this in the customer's tenant in Azure. So, the customer will have their own cloud Azure tenant. They'll install FTK. So that's how the process is currently at West Mids. I don't think we're very far away. I thought we were years. I don't think we're very far away from it being as a service.
No, and they told John Price, you can't build the solution that you want to build until 2025. It is not possible. And John Price said, hold my beer.
Yeah, hold my beer. 2022.
Hold my pint. Right. Hold my pint. I will do it. I will do it 3 years earlier than expected. And it will go swimmingly. And so, yeah, I mean, I think everyone thinks it's like, oh, we're so far off. No, we're already doing it now. And so now if you haven't even started your evaluation process of how to upgrade your workflow into something like this, like you're just behind. You're already behind.
Necessity breeds innovation, breeds progress. And that's really what we have isolated lately, is that there is a big necessity. When we're talking even mid-sized to large departments and stuff that are working case after case after case after case after case, cloud, I think, is the future, and review and, distributed review and collaboration. These are the ways that we're going to mitigate, if not, hopefully, that'd be the dream, defeat the problem of these caseloads.
Yeah, I think it's a great talking point too when you're out talking to police leadership, right? You're not talking to the IT department, or you're not even necessarily talking to the DFU, but it's collaborating with the DFU on exactly how bad their volume is and how bad their backlog is, and then being able to translate that to a chief of police, or the lead constable, or whatever the head position is. into metrics that matter to them, right? Because solving crime, protecting the population matters. If you don't do a good job, then you're out of a job. So I think that that's the only way to do it, is to automate the process. I mean, you can't, the days of doing blood matching by saying, yeah, they're both A positive. I mean, we're way past that, right? DNA put us way, way past that. We're way past that when it comes to digital evidence as well. I mean, we really need to be processing it and processing at scale. And you can't do that, and I agree with you. In the small shops, it's going to be hard, right? That lends itself to kind of a shared services model at some point, and I think we'll get there. But I think in the next 12 to 24 months, we will see an acceleration of, large to medium-sized policing organizations in the U.S. and certainly outside the U.S. moving these workloads to cloud.
A lot of great comments and a lot of things where I think we have really highlighted where the industry is going and where it needs to go. Is there anything you kind of want to add in conclusion? I think it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, really appreciate the partnership of Exterro and working closely with you, and what you've done in West Mids and beyond that. What you're doing with your customers is amazing. So really appreciate your partnership, and we're happy to go on the journey with you. And then with our customers, we don't ever want to be the vendor that shows up knocking on your door with our bag of stuff to sell you. That's not what we want to do. We want to be a partner. We want to go on the journey with you. We'd love to do envisioning sessions. So if people that hear this podcast are curious and say, I just want to see that, please reach out. Reach out through Exterro, get to me, we can do it together, but let's have a conversation. Let's show you some of the capabilities. Let's talk about what works for you and how it can work best for you. And if it works and there's an opportunity for us and for you, great. But it really is about the greater good in the policing space and the public safety space. So really appreciate your time, Lynne. It was a pleasure meeting you, and thank you for all your comments, and thanks for having me on the podcast. And I really look forward to continuing to partner with you guys going forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're
David.
thrilled about it, and hopefully we'll have you back and highlight some more agencies that are taking the leap.
Yeah, we need to take someone through a customer story for sure. That would be awesome.
Agreed.